Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into this episode of Crunch Time with Kruck. We're starting today with the special guest, one of our show's favorites, the athletic director for the Avila University Eagles, Shawn Summer. How you doing today?
Great, Kruck. Thanks for bringing me on finally.
Well, no problem. I tried to have you last week with the switch hitters. Ended up having to settle for the softball coach, Bryce White. But today we will be talking about something a little bit closer to home for you, the Chicago Cubs. In 2016, everybody knows they won the World Series, and that was a great moment for all of Illinois, breaking that 108-year drought. But now they're starting to be on the decline again. What do you think the main problem with the Cubs is this year?
I think going back that I feel a big problem was the way they handled the Joe Madden situation. I think the players are kind of like in a wait and see right now of what they're going to do. I mean, you have Javi Baez, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, who are they're on their last year, playing their last year of their contracts out. To not get the extended offer of a fair value, probably, they're going to have to pay to keep those guys, right? So mentally, does that do something for the players? Does that affect the way they've played? It might. It really might. I mean, Anthony Rizzo still is barreling balls up. Chris Bryant's playing as well as he can, but Javi Baez, the last 2 years, has not been the Javi Baez of 2016 to 2019. Different player. He's just kind of, he still plays with the moxie. He still plays with the flair. But his hitting statistics, I would say, are probably down from where they were. How does that happen? How does that affect a younger player versus an Anthony Rizzo who has been a major league player for a longer period of time, right? Chris Bryant's a little more mature period than your normal 26, 27-year-old, 28-year-old.
Absolutely. I mean, really looking at it, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Javier Baez, like you were talking about, three key players on the infield for the for the Cubs. And then, also like three key players in their lineup as well. Like there's some heavy hitting bats there. And, on the end of their contract, Chris Bryant has talked about leaving before this season started. He was in talks with the Mets, and from early on in his career, he was never like truly excited with the Cubs, especially after his first year with the Cubs. They didn't pull him up for enough games to be in the running for Rookie of the Year, so he had to run against the next year's Rookie of the Year class. And, since then, you've always heard these little scuffles between Chris Bryant and the Cubs. Javier Baez has been the face of the Cubs for 2-3 years now, being a great athlete. The no-look tag is a staple of baseball cinema now. And then Anthony Rizzo is, he one of the most hit by pitch batters in the league, but it's just because of how he stands in the plate. And he's one of the most liked people in baseball. And the Cubs are looking to get rid of those three.
What year was Chris Bryant's rookie year? Was it 2015?
Yes.
So that was the year they brought him up. He won the Rookie of the Year in 2015, and I believe that was his first year up. They just brought him up a month later so he'd have that. This last year should have been his free agent year, but they decided to, legally, and they went by the rules of Major League Baseball by waiting to bring him up so they would have an extra year with him under that contract, the rookie contract. But it is different, and I think a lot of it weighs on it because you've heard, as a Cub fan, and I read all I can about the Cubs. I grew up on the Cubs as a toddler, right? We grew up watching WGN, the Cubs every single day, and the Braves on TBS. But what have the Cubs developed pitching-wise? That's the thing, too, I think is a big part of this whole process. They have not had a home – I mean, I guess Alzolay is a homegrown pitching prospect that they have. Other than that, if you look at their rotation today, right, Jake Arrieta was traded for, right? They got him from Baltimore. Trevor Williams, free agent. Zach Davies, trade for Darvish. Kyle Hendricks was in the trade with Texas, came from Texas. And Alec Mills, I can't remember if Alec Mills was a homegrown one or not. But you look at that, they are not developing the pitching. So what does that Because I think you see some games lately, they've started offensively to have better games, but they can't figure out the pitching from the starting rotation. Outside of Jake Arrieta, who's given them quality starts, he's 3-2 right now, right, with a 2.5 ERA. I mean, he is, and people weren't expecting that. People, his last 2 years in Philly were not good. I mean, by his numbers, he was 500 pitcher. But that was not expected to be the strength of this staff. Absolutely. And I think it's interesting because I think if you look at it, right, there's 6 guys that have started games for them this year, and it's Mills, Williams, Arrieta, Davies, Hendricks, and Alzolay. I don't know if you know anything about it, but 5 of those 6 are pretty much the same exact pitcher. Mm-hmm. Alzolay is the only one that shows real velocity. They're all in that. Davies and Hendrick are going to be successful around that 87 to 90 range, and the other guys will be 91, maybe up to 91, 92. So I think that's a different thing for this rotation than other rotations. And a lot of their struggles right now are these teams are facing the same type of pitcher every day. Now there might be a different off-speed pitch. It might be something else, but the fastball is going to be the same pretty much until you get to Alzolay. So I think that's a big part of why they're struggling right now, and it kind of depends on when you fall in that rotation and when they do throw. But there's no lefties in that rotation. But then you look at some of the bullpen stats, and I wrote some of these down just to go over it, right? So then you have guys coming out of the bullpen that you do have your lefty with Andrew Chafin, and then you have Kimbrel, Rex Brothers, Dylan Maples, guys that. They have a little velocity in Winkler as well, too. But you look at their stuff, and Kimbrel's thrown 10 innings, nine outings so far, 15 strikeouts in 10 innings. Dylan Maples, 16 strikeouts in 9 1/3 innings. Rex Brothers, 15 and 9 1/3. And Chafin, 13 and 10 2/3. They're different than those starting pitchers. So that changes the perception of what the hitters have seen the entire game, and they come in. And it's no different than starting pitching. So if you got the same guy going in a 3-game set, right? The 4-game set that they just played with the Braves, the first 3 were absolutely atrocious. I mean, Hendricks gave up 4 in the first, 2 in the second. They were down 6-0 to begin. I mean, where are you at with that? Then Alzolay throws last night, and he does a great job. It gives them a chance to win. But it's a different stuff than the Braves saw the 3 nights prior.
So, last question before we wrap up. The Cubs are infamous for taking a while to get back to glory. The 108-year World Series drought, and then along with the rebuilding, that took a long time, well before I was even born. If the Cubs do decide to, get rid of all the value on their team and try to start rebuilding, how long do you think it would take for them to get back to playoff caliber baseball?
With the way baseball is today, it's going to take them a long time. You look at it, the Dodgers, I mean, the young players that the Dodgers have, the Dodgers seem to do it every year. There was a year, there was in the 90s, in the early 2000s, it seems like they had a Rookie of the Year winner pretty much every year. It was impressive, that turnaround. They still have that. Their farm system's better than most. But you look at the young stars in the game right now, who do the Cubs have? Because right now Javi is he's a great player. I mean, I'm not saying he's not, but I would take Lindor over him in a heartbeat, right? I mean, I think most baseball people would. When you look at that, I just don't think they have it. They have quality young players, but not a superstar. Nico Horner he's come up, and they sent him down to begin with. And he's come back up, and he's hitting 368, or he was at least going into last night. But those are guys that there's no flash in Nico Horner, though. He's going to put the ball in play. He's not going to strike out, and he's going to do the little things right. But what you get for Javi, right, is you're going to get a lot of strikeouts, some wild swings, and pitches nowhere near the zone. But you're going to get a ball that he tanks 480 feet over the bleachers in left field, and you're going to get some flashy defense. But the problem is that is harder to replicate than what Nico Horner does every day. So it's going to take them a while because they don't have those, young guys, the Jorge Solers, who we talked about a little bit earlier, right? He was probably my favorite Cub in 2016. But, Soler is – they don't have those guys. Those guys were all coming up at that time. Baez, Bryant, Soler in a 3 to 4 year span, and then Contreras and others. So they just don't have that, and they're trying to patch it together and get through this year and be competitive. But at the end of the day, the way it's going, they're going to have to sell these pieces and get rid of them to get some younger talent. I love the Darvish trade, and I love Zach Davies. He's off to a shaky start, but Davies is a quality major league pitcher, and they got young talent that are in the minors right now from that trade. That's what they're going to have to do to rebuild that farm system. But they have to be able to develop pitching on their own and not have to go sign that free agent pitcher and do that.
Absolutely.
It's going to take a while.
It probably will. And that has been the wrap-up of our opening excerpt where we talk about the Chicago Cubs with the Chicago Cubs fan, Shawn Summer. Thank you. And now we're going to head to the regularly scheduled program. And we're back to the normal two here. We just had that interview with the athletic director, Shawn Summer. And we're back to the normal, just two of us. It's been 10 episodes, Max.
Wow, it's been 10 episodes, Kruck. It's been a lot of fun, man.
I lost a lot of hair throughout these 10 episodes, so let's jump right into it. First topic's going to be the NFL draft, and, we all knew Trevor Lawrence was going number one.
Yes.
But what's the other biggest takeaway that you got, Max?
Kruck, throughout this draft, we can all say it was surprising as usual, right? There was a lot of things, a lot of trades. First, I'm going to start off with the 49ers. Everyone was speculating, what will the 49ers do? Will it be Mac Jones, Trey Lance, maybe Justin Fields at that spot? But at the end, they get with Trey Lance. And I believe that's actually a better fit overall for their team. I think it kind of fits a little bit better with Shanahan's offense. Obviously, he needs a lot to develop. And I don't know what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo. So that's going to be an interesting situation to watch there in San Francisco. How will Kyle Shanahan treat Trey Lance, and how will that organization be? Next, I'm going to go to my Bengals. If you don't know, I'm wearing a hat just backwards of my Bengals today. But anyways, they actually got Jamar Chase at the number 5 pick, which for me personally, if Joe Burrow – here's the thing. The Bengals, if you don't know, the Bengals are having problems with protecting Joe Burrow. They've had problems with that since last season, and they need help with that overall. At that spot, they could have found Penei Sewell or Rashad Slater, those two picks if they wanted to. I personally thought maybe Penei Sewell was better there. But overall, I think it was the Chase and Burrow connection that they had. And a lot of that actually happened in this draft, Krug. We saw a lot of future connections with picks. We had Chase and we had Burrow. We had Waddle, and he's going to want Waddle with Tua. That's going to be happening with Miami, which is, I think, a great fit for Jalen Waddle going to Miami. And then Hurts and Devontae Smith, another one, too. They only played for a little bit of time. And then at the end, we saw Urban Meyer go with 2 Clemson people. That's very interesting. He's getting Trevor Lawrence, which we all expected, and then he got Travis Etienne. But going back to the Bengals, I think overall it's not a bad pick. Hopefully it'll work out, but they definitely got to look for some offensive linemen in the next couple of rounds. And I got some picks that might be some picks to look out for. Look out for this offensive tackle named Liam Eichenberg from Notre Dame. That's another one to look out for. He's very athletic, got strong hands, power, so maybe that'll be a big pick. I don't know if you remember this guy, Coke. You remember Quinn Ewers from Wisconsin Whitewater? That was another. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was known for the draft, and it was very interesting. Like the low-level guy, made a lot of reps in the combine and everything else, so he could be a pick. And then for my Buckeyes as well, Wyatt Davis from Ohio State. That could be a possible pick as well. And then, Kruk, we got to mention Justin Fields. Go into your Bears. You got any quick thoughts about that at all?
I mean, absolutely. Justin Fields went to the Bears. I'll be honest. I was sitting in Buffalo Wild Wings watching the draft, and that was not the person I wanted. I personally wanted an offensive lineman because I don't think the Bears' O-line is the best that it can be, but Justin Fields is a great pick. I mean, I'm probably going to learn to like him. He has a strong arm. He's got good size. He has excellent top-end speed, so when he gets to as fast as he can go, he's pretty fast. He's got great accuracy, both short and middle. Andy Dalton and Nick Foles are already on the staff, but they're both on the wrong side of 30 years old. So they could be great mentors for Justin Fields. Even after this pick, it was a pretty good pick. Even after this pick, Pace and Nagy are both still going to be on their last years of their contract, and the odds are against them to get re-signed. But to talk again about Trevor Lawrence going to the Jags, I mean, this guy has been talked about for 2 straight years. If you turn on any college football network, they'll say his name at least once an hour. One of the crazy things happening with the Jaguars as well, one of the Florida teams, I forgot which one it was, but Tim Tebow's getting a tryout at tight end.
Yeah.
So the
Very
Jaguars,
interesting.
looking at that. You talked about it, ETN going to Jaguars as well, late first round. He's going to join one of the people that I went to high school with, James Robinson, who's more of a speed back. ETN is more of a power back. So that's going to be an interesting combo. It's going to be easy to tell what they're doing depending upon who's in the backfield, but it is awesome. Another pick that went really early and was not all that unexpected, Zach Wilson going to the Jets. Jets just got rid of Sam Darnold, and so Zach Wilson had a great pro day. Everybody remembers the long throw he had off his back foot, and then later Justin Fields would, interpret that throw himself as well. But, I mean, he fits the New York mold. He loves the big city. He can lead a team, and he doesn't crack under pressure. Those are 3 things that Sam Darnold just really couldn't get around to. Like, when he first started and he had a bad game, he would just snowball into a worse and worse game. He really couldn't lead the team. He needed somebody else to be the leader on that Jets team. And, I mean, loves a big city. I couldn't tell you whether or not he loved it, but I can tell you whether or not the city loved him.
Yeah, and here's what I'm going to say about – we talked about Fields, and I wanted to ask that question to you first because I wanted to ask, like, what do you think of Fields? Because when I think of Ohio State, when he was at Ohio State, he was kind of known for being both the passer and the runner. You know, he's a both dual threat kind of quarterback. And if you look at it with the Bears, they're looking at this is their they did something wrong with Trubisky. When they went with it, they had a chance to get Mahomes and others back in the earlier of a draft, and they didn't do that. And now I'm looking at it's the same situation. You're getting a character like Justin Fields, who to me is the most athletic out of the quarterbacks of this year's draft, I think so far. And when I look at that, that's important for the Bears and your whole organization. And I believe the Bears, if they can get this right, and Nagy's going to have to treat him well. I believe if Fields wants to be successful with the Bears, they're going to have to start with him right away, get him going, because that's going to be important for him and the organization. And one player I want to get to, I really like this pick by the Dallas Cowboys. They kind of did it interesting with trading with the Eagles there with the 10-12 pick. How about that? An inner rivalry trade pick there. That's very interesting as well. But anyways, in return of that, they got Micah Parsons from Penn State. And Kruck, I think he's one of the best players, but definitely the best defensive player in my mind in this year's draft. When I look at Micah Parsons, he plays angry all the time. He plays angry, plays side by side, and he makes a lot of plays for that team. When you look at the Cowboys right now, they have Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch at the Cowboys this week. He could fit right there and be a fit for that organization. And he also, the thing about him too is he can play all over the field. He used to play a defensive end back in high school. Before then he came to play a linebacker at Penn State. That's very cool to see. He's versatile. He can make a lot of plays, and if I'm the Cowboys, you got to use him well, especially with that defense being what it was last year.
I mean, absolutely. Looking at the draft, there were a lot of comparisons to other players. 31 of the 32 players drafted in the first round last night were compared to a different player. The only one not compared to anybody else in or previously been in the NFL was Trevor Lawrence. So Trevor Lawrence, before he even plays a snap, is going to have some of the biggest shoes to fill in terms of the NFL and in terms of his team. One of the people who was compared to Patrick Mahomes, the current quarterback for the Chiefs, was compared to Trey Lance, the other way around. Trey Lance is an under-center quarterback, but he is a true dual-threat quarterback. He has a great arm, he's got good size, and his top-end speed is rivaling to Fields. It's going to be a battle between him and Jimmy G for the top spot, and Jimmy G was supposed to be the next Tom Brady. That was the indication Belichick was giving everybody and Robert Kraft while he was in New England. But the 49ers quarterbacks, in the last 4 years, the 49ers quarterbacks have given up 83 turnovers. Not a stat you want to hang your hat on if you're, the coach for the 49ers. Another pick I want to talk about, Mac Jones. Talking about being compared to Tom Brady, he is being compared to Tom Brady because he's white and he got drafted by the Patriots as a quarterback.
The stereotypical, basically, of Brady almost.
He's a great field reader. He processes really quickly. He has a very quick throw release. Not as quick as Aaron Rodgers, but it is really quick. He leads his wide receivers well to getting yards after the catch, but Cam Newton just re-signed, so I believe Cam Newton's probably going to start the season, but he will not end the season as the starting quarterback for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, Mac Jones out of all this draft is the most kind of pocket kind of passer that the NFL has looked at in this draft. And now when you look at the NFL now, and I'm saying this about Mac Jones, is that Mac Jones, he could be like Tom Brady and how accuracy and how everything, but the NFL has changed. And what I believe is that with Trey Lance, I think who the 49ers pick was going to be a big one forever was there. And I say that because the 49ers are known, especially Shanahan's known to improve quarterbacks over time. And he's known to do that. And when you look at Zach Wilson, we talked about him earlier. You mentioned about him, Zach Wilson with the Jets. It's that whole organization and just wasn't what you expect. And that's what Sam Darnold was struggling with. He didn't have the weapons or anything else around him. And I feel like it feels like it could be the same. I just don't know with the Jets. They need a lot of help in New York, I believe, in order to get to that level. And then finally, before we move on, Kruck, I just got to mention Trevor Lawrence. I mean, everyone compares him back to, back with Andrew Luck and all those quarterbacks and everyone else. And I think Trevor Lawrence, it's going to be interesting to see how Urban Meyer and him connect the first season. That's going to be very interesting because he's first-year coach, first-year player. That's going to be very interesting to watch how both of those two get along with each other.
Absolutely. Moving forward, the Chiefs traded a bunch of picks to the Ravens, and they got a couple back, but the main thing they got back was this man named Orlando Brown. Orlando Brown is a left tackle for the Ravens, and after the Chiefs got rid of their previous left tackle and first-round draft pick, Eric Fisher, they needed a new one. So they picked up one of the best ones in the league to help protect their $500 million investment in Patrick Mahomes. What do you got on that?
Kruk, basically just mentioned it. They needed protection for Patrick Mahomes. I mean, especially when you got a contract like that, you're hoping you get offensive line, right? You need offensive line, and they knew what happened when it was in the Super Bowl. When they got to the Super Bowl and the Tampa Bay was just getting after him every play, it just didn't feel like Patrick Mahomes was himself. He didn't look like himself. He didn't look like everyone else. And I think that's what they want to address this offseason and possibly in the draft, but obviously they traded that pick with the Ravens in that. But I'm now looking at what the Chiefs' offensive line is now. They got Thuney and Colum, both from New England, both good tackles with this way. And they're going to get back two people that had the COVID-19 opt-outs, and Laurent Duvernay-Tardif and Lucas Niang. Two good people, again, that can help out the Chiefs. And that's going to be important for Patrick Mahomes. And, what's funny, Patrick Mahomes obviously agrees with this because on Twitter he's posting smiley faces of him enjoying time getting the offensive line. And who wouldn't when you're a quarterback like that and need that? So that's important for the Chiefs. Now, I'm going to get it as the Ravens' perspective too, because we always talk about the Chiefs, right? When we talk about deals, we got to talk about, I believe, both sides. With the Ravens, I think now losing Brown Jr. is a big piece. That guy he's big, Kruk, and he made a lot of plays for that Ravens offense, especially how the Ravens, they do kind of the running option kind of run plays that Lamar Jackson does with J.K. Dobbins, and obviously that's a big part for their offense. And when I'm looking at it now, they had to get future players to help out Lamar. I think definitely they needed weapons. And they did get that last night, getting Rashad Bateman from Minnesota, which I believe if he didn't opt out, actually, he would be another pick to watch out for another pick as well. I really like Rashad Bateman. He's tall. His speed is okay. It's not great, but he's got length too. That's another thing I like, and that's what Lamar Jackson's needing in that organization. They need length and receivers and weapons as well for that organization. So it's both ways. The Chiefs, they got it because they need protection for Patrick Mahomes, and then the Ravens, they got some playmakers and to help them out. So,
I mean, absolutely. Just looking at the quick breakdown of what they each gave away, the Chiefs gave away a first-round, third-round, and fourth-round pick this year, as well as the fifth-round pick next year. The Ravens, as well as trading away the left tackle Orlando Brown, they gave away this year's fifth-round pick, so they basically swapped fifth-round picks, and then next year's sixth-round pick. So, picks going both ways. One player coming to the Chiefs. We're going to see how he pans out, but all indications says that he should be the next best lineman for the Chiefs.
Yeah, and that's very important, Kruk, right? I mean, that's especially like we mentioned just a second ago. They need that in Kansas City, and they just need that overall for their organization. But, Kruk, we're going to transition. We're going to move over to a more recent trade that happened. That was last week with Mahomes trade, but now a recent trade happened with Bridgewater going to the Denver Broncos. That's very interesting. This is obviously Teddy Bridgewater to the Denver Broncos for a 6th-round pick in this year's 2021 draft. According to the reports, they're saying the Panthers will pay Bridgewater $7 million, while the Broncos are going to pay him $3 million in this trade. So, Kruck, overall, how do you think about this?
Well, I'll be honest. When I first looked it up, a video popped up of Max Kellerman talking about the trade. And out of all people that I would honestly listen to, Max Kellerman, it depends what kind of a mood he's in, because some days he wants Andre Iguodala taking the shot over Steph Curry. Other days, he actually makes some pretty stark comments, and this is one of them. He said that he would take Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th-round pick in a heartbeat, because if Teddy Bridgewater was in the draft today, he would not wait until the 6th round to be taken. He is NFL proven. You know, he had some good play in there. He had some poor play, but I mean, honestly, as a fan who had to cheer for Trubisky, I would take Bridgewater for the Bears right now. We did get Justin Fields, so I'm happy with that. But, I mean, Bridgewater is not as bad as it looks. Like a 6th-round pick, dude, the Broncos got this deal easy. I mean, the Panthers, Teddy Bridgewater is on a $10 million contract, and the Broncos are only going to pay $3 million of it. The Panthers are going to the Panthers are going to pay Bridgewater $7 million to play for another team. The Panthers really lost this deal, but they ended up getting the guy they wanted, Sam Darnold, from the Jets. So, I mean, back to the Broncos. They're going to have a battle for QB1, Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. Last night, they did not take a quarterback. They ended up, trading up with the Cowboys, and they still didn't get a quarterback.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously in that they got the 9th pick, they got Patrick Surtain, so they were looking defense instead of offense. But I don't know. I guess in that room they believe in both in what's happening with Locke and what's happening with Bridgewater, and that's gonna be interesting to watch with Drew Lock. When I look at both of these quarterbacks, Kruk, they almost look very similar with had the stats they had last season. Locke last season, he threw for 16 touchdowns and 15 interceptions with 2,933 yards. And when we look at Bridgewater for last season, he had 15 touchdowns and 11 interceptions for 3,703 yards. So kind of similar with both the interception touchdown ratio he had. And like you mentioned, Bridgewater obviously had his good year. Obviously, when he was back with the Saints, he backed up with them, and he did a good job backing up that whole organization, making them better. And I don't know. I guess it's when you look at Bridgewater, I think he's an okay quarterback. I always thought that with Bridgewater, even coming out of Louisville. He was an okay quarterback that could make good throws, and he could help out, stay in the league, make plays. But I just didn't think he had, when I say an it factor. And when I say the it factor is you got to have something different that's something out there. And with the NFL now, when you look at Mahomes, he has the it factor of making plays happen. When you look at Rodgers and Breeze, even though they're older and they more pocket passer quarterbacks, they have something that they do all the time that makes the plays. And I just don't see that with Bridgewater right now. And maybe something will happen there with Denver. Like you mentioned, they didn't get a quarterback in the draft. They got Patrick Surtain, and obviously Cowboy fans are really looking for that. They were looking for Patrick Surtain to be in there, but obviously that didn't work out. So it's going to be interesting with what's happening in Denver, especially with how they made that run to the Super Bowl that one year. And now they got to get their whole defense healthy, because with the whole defense they had, with Von Miller and that whole defensive staff, that was a ferocious team. And maybe if they can build that back up, they could be a possible contender. And one more thing before I'll leave it to you, Kruck, is I'm going to talk about Sam Darnold real quick. And with Sam Darnold, I think now they're going to try to make Sam Darnold the franchise quarterback with the Panthers. And listen, when I mentioned about Zach Wilson earlier, right, when we talked about the New York Jets and the whole organization they have there and how they didn't – their whole franchising's help, their GM and everything needs to get better, because it doesn't feel like when you're in a New York market, you expect New York to be something big and something like that, right? And obviously that's what they expected with Sam Darnold. It just never panned out with them. It's because, and I think that has to come to a number of factors, like I mentioned, the organization, the weapons that he didn't have, and obviously the team around him. Now if you go to Carolina, it's a little bit different. There's a little bit of hope. And I'm saying that because you got Joe Brady, that was a great offensive coordinator, good offensive mind. You got Christian McCaffrey, and you got some better weapons overall. And maybe that will be something that maybe makes Sam Darnold better. I mean, we'll just have to see.
I mean, absolutely. Just like breaking it down for you all at home, Sam Darnold did not pan out in New York. Obviously, he got traded to the Panthers. He was a good college quarterback, but he's not the leader a team needs. He needs somebody else. Being with the Panthers, the offensive and, frankly, team leader is Christian McCaffrey. So he does not have to lead the team. He just has to show up and put the work in. The Panthers should still look for a quarterback, but I do believe they should give Darnold a shot. The Jets obviously had that number 2 pick, so, I mean, they weren't worried about not getting a quarterback.
I guess they're looking for their future, Kruck. They're trying to help themselves out, and hopefully it can pan out for them. So.
And something that's breaking news, even more current than that one, Aaron Rodgers does not want to come back to Green Bay. The MVP quarterback is looking to settle his losses with Green Bay and move on. He released a set of teams he'd like to play for, 2 of which are the Broncos and the Raiders. Out of any team to play for, I think the Raiders would be my last team. But then again, I don't make $33.5 million a year throwing a football. Max, what do you got on that?
Kruck, I don't know why. I kind of expected this to actually kind of happen. And I say that because over the years, you saw Rodgers' facial expressions and how he was acting and how he's looking around. And I think this all kind of got more amped when they tried to pick Jordan Love back in last year's draft. And everyone was wondering, why would they do that? They got Rodgers. Rodgers is the face of the franchise, and they all believe in that. And the whole organization hasn't really helped them. And I obviously say this. When we look at the Packers and their weapons, the Packers really, to me, honestly, only had Devontae Adams. That was maybe a big factor. Lazard at the end, he kind of did well. But overall, I mean, they needed weapons. And in that draft, the 2019 draft, when they got Love, they didn't really address that. And I'm looking at this draft as well. Will they do that in the future? Well, we'll have to see in the later rounds. But obviously, the first-round pick, they got a DB. So that's already telling you something is going on with that organization with Rodgers. And now when you mention, like, the teams and the Raiders and Broncos, I think the most sense, we kind of just talked about it with the quarterbacks and the Broncos. I think that's an overall better fit if I had to choose between those 2 teams. And I say that because, obviously, like I mentioned before at the Broncos, they have a good overall defense that's still improving. It hasn't been great over the years, but they're going to get people back. And their whole weapons, they got Judy there. They got Noah Fant from Iowa, which I think he's talented, that Fant guy. And overall, everyone else around that whole organization. And that's going to be important for Rodgers. And obviously, I mean, there's other things too. He just got guest hosting Jeopardy, Kruck. I mean, he's guest hosting Jeopardy. He's got a lot of things on his mind. And obviously, he knew that it's just time to make a change. And I think it's, to me, the right move with what everything's going on.
I mean, absolutely right. The NFC Championship game has been a staple for Aaron Rodgers. He's been getting there an awful lot. Unfortunately, he just can't win it an awful lot of the time. Rodgers said, and I quote, he is uncertain when asked if he will return to Green Bay after the NFC Championship game this past year, losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He is tied in pay with quarterbacks Jared Goff, which Jared Goff is most definitely not an Aaron Rodgers.
Definitely not.
And ahead of him in pay is Kirk Cousins and Carson Wentz. So he's definitely not getting the money that he deserves compared to these other 3 quarterbacks. The Green Bay front office released 2 statements that I'll read for you now. We are not idiots, and Aaron Rodgers will be back. So Green Bay's not trying to lose him, but it's not looking good.
I'm just going to comment on that real quick because, I mean, when media says something like that, I mean, it's like they're shading something. You know that there's really something going on. You know what I mean? I mean, they're saying that because obviously everyone's like, oh, my gosh, Aaron Rodgers is good, and they believe in him. You know, that's what the media is portraying that as. But overall, I just don't see it. You know what I mean? I just don't see it. It's just, I just mentioned it with Love, with how they selected Love, and how he's just acting with it. I mean, sometimes I watch him on Pat McAfee. If you don't watch him on Pat McAfee show, I watch it a lot. He gets on that show like almost a lot. And when he's on that show, I always watch like how he is, and they always ask him about, oh, how's the Packers going? And when his response is, it's not enthusiastic. You know what I mean? That's something right there that's telling you. I always look at that, Kruck, is like how people act and when people say those kind of questions, and he hasn't been like that anymore, which is unfortunate because Green Bay has been his whole home for his entire career. You know, that's been his entire career he's been there. And now, obviously, we're talking about now he might not be there for the coming future. So,
And Adam Scheffler reached out to several teammates of the Green Bay Packer quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers apparently told them, and I'm paraphrasing here, I won't be back. So Rodgers, as you mentioned, he was on Jeopardy. He was a 2-week guest host on Jeopardy. Through those 2 weeks, his contract would have been $10 million for 2 weeks. So when you look at it, $10 million for 2 weeks, $33.5 million for an entire year of football. One, you stand behind a podium and read cue cards. The other, you're throwing a football and getting hit by 350-pound grown men who generally have anger issues. So he ended up not taking the money. He would donate he would donate his salary from the Jeopardy to people in need, donations, charities as such. And I'm a Bears fan. I hate the Packers, but that's really a stand-up thing for Aaron Rodgers. His net worth is over $120 million. He clearly doesn't need the extra $10 million, but the people who do, he gave them the money. So, I mean, that's a stand-up thing to do. I'd like to see him not be with the Packers because I'd like to see him succeed. And, as a Bear fan, I'll never want to see the Packers do good.
obviously, Kruck, that would be your opinion, so I will just keep it at that. We're going to move on, Kruck. We've been talking about NFL this whole time, but this time we're going to talk about some boxing news, Kruck. As we announced, Floyd Money Mayweather is going to return back to the ring to play a YouTube star sensation, now obviously turned into a boxer. Now, Logan Paul, they've announced it's going to be at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami on June 6th. Obviously, we look at this, a 5-time world champion, now at age 44. Obviously, when we look at Mayweather, fighting his last fight that we really saw him in was against MMA star Conor McGregor in 2017. So it's been a while, but Kruk, how do you think of this fight? Do you think it's good for boxing?
Well, I mean, I'll shoot you straight. Logan Paul is the worst, or is the least successful of the two Paul brothers when you really compare them. Jake Paul, people have said he's not a boxer. So he fought Nate Robinson, beat him. People still don't think he's a boxer. He fought Ben Askren, beat him. And then now people are like, oh, if he's so good, why don't you put him up against a real boxer? We've been asking for it, but that's Jake Paul. Logan Paul, on the other hand, hasn't won a fight yet. And he's going against a guy who hasn't lost a fight yet. And his nickname is TBE, the best ever, Floyd Money Mayweather Jr. I mean, honestly, Floyd Mayweather, his last 2 fights, one was against Conor McGregor, who was not a boxer. He's an MMA artist.
Yep.
So, not really fighting a boxer, but he did keep his he kept his featherweight champion of the world title. And now he's going to fight Logan Paul, who is a boxer but isn't a good boxer. And he's going to keep his featherweight champion of the world. I mean, I'm predicting the future here, but he's not going to lose. He's 50-0 with 27, KOs. Honestly, it's an easy way for him to stay on top. That's the only way that I can see him honestly taking the fight.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, Kruk. It's just interesting. I mean, when I look at from the Paul's perspective, from the Paul brothers, I mean, remember who they usually were. They were YouTube kind of stars and sensations. And when I look at that, I think it's like, oh, it's Floyd Mayweather. That's the fight you want to look at. And he's starting to be a boxer, and he's big time. But then you realize it's like, okay, he's really trying to do it for, I think, some fame or interesting kind of purpose. Because I believe the result's going to not be well. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, Mayweather is just 50, like you mentioned, 50-0, and he's done a lot in the sport of boxing. When I look at it from both sides, I mean, come on, man, this is a boxing match that probably won't go your way for the Paul. And then when I'm looking at it at Mayweather's perspective, he's retired. He's done a lot of fights. And then you're looking at, why would I want to try to go against a guy against a Paul brother that's a YouTube kind of star that started this way and try to see if the fight was that? So that's what I'm kind of getting at is, I mean, it's an okay fight. Yes, it'll be entertaining, obviously, because they're going to have 2 big-time names. But I always think about, I mean, is it important for the fight? When we mentioned McGregor, that I think was for a purpose. Because when I look at for McGregor, he was an MMA kind of star, and he was back trying to get something with McGregor. And that's actually 2 fighters wanting to go at it, like real kind of fighters, real kind of people that look at it. And when I look at it with Paul's, I mean, they kind of started off like, okay, well, we wanted to try to get into boxing. We're playing these, other YouTube boxers and other boxers around, but they haven't really got the fame to known to play Mayweather. And that's kind of like, it's almost like a promotional event. Kind of. It's like a promotional event of, hey, we're just going to get you to watch this fight and see it might go out in like the second round. That's really what I think this fight's going to be. So you got any other thoughts about it?
Honestly, not really. We started off the podcast with baseball with Shawn Summer, and we're going to finish it with baseball with this week's MLB Weekly. New on top is the Kansas City Royals. Last time they were on top of the MLB, it was 2015, and they won the World Series. I was in high school. You were in high school. And that was a long time ago in respective history of, well, the two hosts here. For Shawn Summer, it probably wasn't too long ago for him. But just doing the breakdown, the top 5 go as following. The Royals, the Giants, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, and then the Athletics. So, I mean, the top 5 are probably really not that stacked with playoff-heavy teams. I could see the Dodgers going a long way because they are the Dodgers. The Royals, I think they're just on a hot streak before All-Star break. The Giants, I think that's a very sugar-coated position. I don't think they're going to stay at number 2. The Red Sox have been playing good baseball of late, but they did drop a couple games to the Mariners, which is not something you want to do. And then the Oakland Athletics, they're somehow playing as well as they did in Moneyball, on a great run so far. And then, I have to put it in there. Coming in at number 6 is my Milwaukee Brewers. So,
yeah, I mean, you kind of mentioned it. And three of those 5 teams you mentioned, Kruck, were all out west. So that's kind of funny. Like all these teams out west, the Giants and the Dodgers, and we talk about the Athletics, all leading in there right now. Well, the Dodgers and Giants, same division, but they're still in top and close by in the division, and the Athletics leading theirs as well. And I'm looking at the NL West. That right now, to me, is probably the best division right now in baseball by far. And it's just because you got the Padres. And I'm going to mention this Padres-Dodgers series that happened last weekend. That was just very entertaining to me, Kruk. Tatis Jr. was just hitting home runs left and right over the Dodgers. I mean, and that's crazy. And then you go in on Sunday night, last Sunday night, it was funny. The Dodgers were up 7-1 in the game. And then all of a sudden, they just fell down, and the Padres came all the way back and won in extras, and they won the game 8-7. That's incredible, don't you think? I mean, that's really incredible to watch. And one team, though, that you did mention, though, is the Kansas City Royals. And the Kansas City Royals, to me, I get it. They are starting strong. But I really like how this team's starting to develop themselves. And when I mention that is during the time in the offseason, they got Carlos Santana from Cleveland. That was a big pickup. And the bats, he's got 5 home runs, 20 hits, 13 runs batted in. And then also getting a young star from Boston, and they got Andrew Benintendi, which I really like this guy, Benintendi. He's an athletic person. He makes a lot of plays in the outfield. And, he's another person that's going to help this team out. Now, obviously, it's the beginning of the year. We can't make any speculations right now. But obviously, when we look at the Royals, they're going to have players like Merrifield and Solar, another good staff that's around there that can help them as well. But also, I think if the Royals want to contend, I don't know if you want to agree with me, Kruk, they got to get their pitching staff. Their pitching staff has got to be better, I think, overall to contend. And right now, they need probably another pitcher that's going to help them overall. But I really like what the Royals are doing right now here in Kansas City.
Jacob Junis has been carrying an awful large load for the Royals, as well as Brady Singer and then a couple of the other people on their rotation. But the Royals do need better pitching. Mm-hmm. Their offense is touch and go. But as I mentioned, the Milwaukee Brewers are number 6. They are 9-3 on the road and 50% at home, so not too shabby of a start. The Yankees, we talked about the Yankees, the Rays, and the Braves all being super low. Like last time we talked 2 weeks ago.
It's weird.
The Yankees are no longer, the Yankees remain unusually low on the charts. The other 2 teams are no longer that low anymore. The Rays and the Braves both turned things around, and they're moving up 10 spots respectively from where they were last time we talked. So why are the Bronx Bombers taking such a hard start to the season?
Kruck, it's a hard question to ask. I actually have I couldn't answer this to you in a straight answer. It's because it's funny when you look at both of these players, Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, both of those guys were the players, right? They are the two guys that make the Yankees happen. And the whole pitching staff and Garrett Cole, they paid a lot of money for Garrett Cole to try to make him he hasn't lived up to it. And I think it's just maybe something isn't clicking in the Yankees organization right now. And that's what's happening with the organization. Obviously, it's a long season, so obviously we can see what will happen. But I just think there's something that's not clicking, and overall they need to fix that up if they want to keep contending.
And absolutely, you talked about two of the main players, Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton. Another key players for the Yankees, Luke Voit, Gleyber Torres, the best second baseman in all of baseball, DJ LeMahieu. Behind the plate, Gary Sanchez. Some people hate on him. He's not doing too bad today or this year. On the mound, though, they have some of the best pitchers. Garrett Cole, Corey Kluber. I mean, these are great pitchers. They still got Clint Frazier out there in the outfield if they need him. I mean, honestly, these are not terrible players, but for some reason they're just not clicking this year.
Yeah, I mean, especially you just mentioned Corey Kluber. That's another guy from the Indians. That's another important piece for that offense. And, he came from the Indians, and everyone was talking about him being another great pitcher, just like Garrett Cole. And I'm just going to compare real quick what you say about the Yankees and the Dodgers. And I'm going to ask that because when I look at Corey Kluber and then I look at Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer was the NL Cy Young winner, and right now he's doing not bad success with the Dodgers right now. They're having a winning record. So that's still important with this one. You look at the Yankees, that's not happening with Kluber. And that's not happening with their organization and how their pitching staff and apparently their hitting as well is not working out for them. So obviously, Kruck, it's a long season, but Yankees, they got to get it moving.
Absolutely. And this has been the 10th episode of Crunch Time with Kruck. We got one more coming up next week. And then we're going to take a little break for finals week here at college, and we'll be back to you next week for sure. Until then, Mad Max, Kruck. We'll see you next time.